You're going to be unveiling a budget for 2014 in a
Yep.
few weeks, and in the past 3 years you have proposed budgets that did not increase the tax levy, including one that reduced it. However, your opponent says that that's only possible because that the county has borrowed tens of billions of dollars. And so, in the 2013 budget, the county deferred approximately $35 million of the $91 million due in pension costs through the state amortization program. Is borrowing now the best strategy in respect to pensions and other costs that are not controlled by the county?
Well, let me just correct one thing. I mean, we don't borrow for operating costs like the city of New Rochelle has been doing for the last 3 years. We pay back in full our tax rebates, certiorari as they're called. We stopped the practice of raiding the reserves as the Spano administration had done, which New Rochelle has done, and drained their reserves from $13.5 million down to $1. That's why they got a credit downgrade. We have made sure that we put fiscal discipline back into this county, and that required making some hard choices, but we did it, and that's why we said we were not going to raise the county tax levy. We'll start with that, and then we can compromise throughout the budget. The only thing that we do borrow for are the pensions, for part of it, and that, like every other community in New York, has to be done simply because nobody has had the operating cash to pay it in full because the system has gone crazy. The pension cost for Westchester went from $3.3 million in 2001. Last year was $81 million. This year it's $91 million. Next year is projected to be about $95 million. So nobody has that kind of cash, unless you want to do massive layoffs and service cuts, which certainly the Board of Legislators was not willing to do. And you know, we have downsized in this county, and if we hadn't done that, not only would taxes have gone through the roof, but we'd be going even higher for pension costs. So it's a balance. We've made the right decisions, and we'll continue to make the right decisions. And when the budget comes out real soon, it will be a fourth straight year without any property tax increase in the levy.
Now, your opponent has hammered shared services as the key to lowering the cost of government. Do you see that as an opportunity where you could be doing more with shared services?
We certainly do. We have 130 different shared services with our municipalities. If he wants to actually share some services, he should go to the Shared Service Expo. We haven't seen him at all. He should not create new taxing jurisdictions and do just the opposite, which he did with a library tax, with a garbage fee, which has quadrupled. Those were both in the operating budgets. He spun them off and created new creatures, which are out of control. So he's doing just the opposite what he's saying everyone else should be doing, and in fact we are doing. With Ossining, that was a great shared service, which could really be the model going forward, certainly in the next 4 years, where the county basically took over at no cost to county taxpayers, but a tremendous savings to the town of Ossining, the police department. And we're actually patrolling and doing all the police services for Ossining. We just signed an agreement with Tuckahoe, which is going to save them $250,000, where the county is now doing the dispatching overnight for the Tuckahoe police. These are good shared services that really are meaningful and can change the paradigm. We're also in discussions with other communities at looking at police services and some other biggies. So we're doing our part. There's no question about it. We've also consolidated within in making sure we have only one department where two existed for the Department of Public Works and Transportation now. One commissioner, one deputy commissioner, instead of a lot of overhead, less of the staff, but the work is getting done. So those are the things that we'll continue to work on with shared services. It is important.
And turning to the HUD settlement, Westchester recently lost $7.4 million in 2011 CDBG grants.
Well, we didn't lose it. It never came our way.
It reallocated.
Right, but it was something from 2011 that was promised, but it was not given to us, and we had to give it back. They decided retroactively they weren't going to give the money.
And they decided to reallocate it because the county did not choose to adopt the assessment of impediments that the federal monitor
that they were trying to force us to adopt. That's correct.
Well, so now that the 2012 grants are still sort of in limbo, what's the future?
That's going to be up to HUD. We will not change the conclusions and the facts to suit them. They are what they are. We have studied every community zoning. So has Pace University independently. We've both reached the same conclusion, that each community does set aside properties all over for affordable housing. They've been doing it. We already have 400 of the 750 units that are already finished or in the process of being finished. We could not do that if these communities had exclusionary zoning which didn't permit it. So it's contrary to the facts. They're telling us, if you want this money, dangling it, it's called extortion in the dictionary. If you want this money, you will change the facts, and then you will start attacking your communities and taking them to court to do away with their zoning restrictions, which protect neighborhoods. It protects neighborhoods from overdevelopment, environmentally. It protects them from overcrowding their schools, from flooding services, and it gives, under the state constitution, the authority of each community to plan and zone for themselves. They want us to take that away from local communities so we can fit HUD's view of what the world should be like here in Westchester. I won't do that, and I'm certainly not going to change the facts or twist the facts and the conclusions to meet their demands. So if HUD chooses, and it's been their choice because we offered them solutions, how to get this money to those communities by bypassing the county, they've chosen not to do that. And so it's their money, it's their choice. If they want to hurt the communities that they're supposed to help, again, their choice. But we're not changing the facts that would, in some ways, completely alter the residential character of some neighborhoods. Every community has different zones for single family, for higher density, for residential, for retail, etc. That's their prerogative. It's not the prerogative of the federal government and bureaucrats in D.C. to dictate how communities are going to be developed and established.
And you said that you believe HUD is trying to dismantle local zoning through this.
They've used the word dismantle, not us. That was the word the monitor used in one of his letters. HUD has said that we are the grand experiment. HUD has said that we need to do these things or else face the consequences. These are their words, not mine. We're reacting to the threats that they're making, and so too are the communities, by the way, because the monitor sent letters to each community. Each community responded, and by the way, they weren't responding with a thank you so much for your observations. They were correcting them. They were telling them we're not putting up with this kind of stuff. And you know, if you read the monitor's report cards and his reallocation of how much they need to put in there for affordable housing, which goes way beyond the stipulation, you can understand why Democrats and Republicans in these communities are outraged at what the federal government is doing. So, you know, it takes it out of me, and only me, battling HUD, to all these communities understanding what we're dealing with and what this threat is. Not an imaginary threat. You know, we're not guessing, we're not going to a fortune teller. We're reading their letters where they spell it all out on what they're demanding. And it's pretty easy to understand.
Now, HUD has said explicitly that they are not requiring communities to build those 10,000, 11,000 extra units. Just, I guess, suggesting by withholding money, suggesting by saying here are the consequences if you don't do it, suggesting by saying the department disagrees that those numbers should not be allocated to each community and that they should not be meeting those standards. You know, you talk about a double standard. They are sitting here saying one thing, but writing another, and writing it to the communities and writing it to the county. And then you look at their actions. If you don't do this, we're taking away the money. And they did. Now, I could have sat there and said, you know what, I don't need to deal with this. Just, we're going to do whatever they say. And then you would have bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. using national standards and dictating to each community how they will develop, what their standards will be, taking away restrictions that limit height, density, acreage, environmental protections, you know, number of bedrooms, which certainly has an impact on local schools and services. And they will dictate to these communities what they will build. No way am I going to do that. Now, Noam Bramson has said this is, quote, an imaginary threat, and that we should compromise and capitulate to the federal government. No way. This is a clear opportunity for Noam Bramson to stand with me and to stand with the communities and say, I'm not choosing bureaucrats in D.C. over our own community leaders. He hasn't done that. From the very beginning, and I've been called obstinate or principled, whatever you want to call me, but I'm going to stand with our communities and the authority that they have under the New York State Constitution. So I guess the question is it worth losing the grants to stand your ground on?
That you know what, that is going to be a question for HUD to have to answer. Because if you're asking me, am I willing to give up all the rights of our communities on land use decisions, I'm not, clearly. And I think they would say they're glad I'm not, and they're standing with me because they answered the monitor and corrected the monitor on what they erroneously said about each community.
And your opponent has called you many things.
Yes.
One of which is, a member of the Tea Party,
Yeah.
and he said that you're too radical for Westchester, that you don't fit in with Westchester. How do you respond to those comments?
You know what? You just take them in the context. We're in the silly season. It is the political window, so he's going to throw out everything humanly possible. And the people of this county know me. I've been elected for 4 years in office now. I work in a very bipartisan way. There are 13 Democrats, 4 Republicans when I walked in the door. There's 10 Democrats, 7 Republicans now. So every piece of legislation that we've passed, and we've done a lot, environmentally we've done a lot. We've had 3 budgets that were passed unanimously without any tax increase. We've done a significant amount of things here. I could not have done that if we didn't work in a bipartisan way. The problem today is what the Noam Bramsons of the world are saying and screaming and shouting and accusing. And that's what's going on in Washington, D.C. That's why nobody talks in D.C. That's why nothing gets done in D.C., because of this hyper-partisanship. But people are going to judge me on my record. It's not like I'm an unknown or I'm running for office for the first time. I'm here. And they're going to judge me on the 4 years that I've been here. And I'm very proud, by the way, of the fact that I've gotten a lot of Democratic support. I did in '09. That's how I got elected. That's how I'll be reelected. I have a lot of non-traditional support for a Republican. The United Black Clergy president is supporting me. The NAACP chairman in New Rochelle is supporting me. WVOX, which is the community radio station in New Rochelle, has endorsed me over their hometown mayor. The labor, all the labor trades, 40 of them have endorsed me for my record with the bridge, etc. So I'm very proud of what we've accomplished, including law enforcement, Hispanic law enforcement. So he could throw out whatever he wants, and I'm going to be judged on what I've done over the last 4 years, not on what he says in a campaign.